back to Fieros and Scale. This episode is going to be inspired by the Model Car Guys show, episode 10, in fact, which is to build or not to build a vintage model car. And I'm covering in this episode the vintage kits, if something from the 80s can be called vintage, of the Pontiac Fiero. Every scale plastic model which was released from 1983 all the way up until 1987 when the 88 model was released. Now there were quite a few differences between these kits and quite a few similarities, and two different model manufacturing companies involved. So we're going to go over that and just go over a brief history of the car. And BG and Lucasy, this is for you guys. You want to talk about vintage? We're going to be talking about vintage. Now, the 6 cars you're looking at here are from my personal collection. These are all still sealed in their original packaging. These are my display pieces, which will probably never get built. There was a big discussion on whether vintage kits should or should not get built. Well, these I want to keep for display purposes because I am a huge fan of the Pontiac Fiero and I like to sort of keep all of their history intact. And the fact that I have tons of these kits, well, not tons, but I have quite a few of them, and so I can build every one of these cars and still maintain these 6 completely intact in their original packaging. Now, we're going to go over the years that this car was produced. Now, this is in 1983, 84, 85, then there was the 85 GT from Monogram, and then MPC came back with the 86 Fastback Rebody and the 88 final year Fastback. The interesting thing about these kits is that as far as the MPC kits are concerned, they all stem from the original tooling from the 1984 model. Now, the 85 Fiero GT that you see here from Monogram, that's an all-new tooling from Monogram released in 1985. And that kit in itself is really a good kit, and we're going to go a little more in-depth into it. Now let's take a closer look at these 3 initial notchbacks. This is the 83, 84, and 85 year releases for these cars. As according to Scalemates, those are the years that these kits were produced. Even though the copyright date on these kits all stem from 1984, I'm gonna guess that Scalemates is correct, as 83, 84, and 85 would be the release dates of these cars. Now, we're gonna take a look at what's similar and different about them. If we look at the instructions, these kits all have the exact same instructions and exact same assembly procedure. The only place where they differ is the optional race body parts and the air intakes on the body, but we'll cover that in a second. If we look at the optional race body parts here, the wing is different and the decals are different. On this one being the 85, this one here, which has this one being the 84, which I don't know if you can see that the rear wing is a completely different multi-piece assembly. This is the 83 model, not the 84. And the decals are also different. Well, we have the exact same assembly. I mean, this is the 84. The other one, previous one was the 83. The 84 and the 85 are the exact same assembly procedure, except that the decals have been changed. And there's one different body detail, which we're going to cover now. Now, the 83 in the red box, of course, comes in red plastic. And if you look closely here, you can see that the air intake on the side of the car is a separate part. Now, this is the original tooling for the entire series of MPC Pontiac Fieros, which that'll be important fact to keep in your head a little bit later. Now, this is the 84, I would say late 84, where you can see they have added an air ram scoop as opposed to the regular vent, air intake vent that was on the side of the car, the stock vent. This is an aftermarket air ram scoop, which was very popular on the car when it was being produced. Other than that, the body's exactly the same. And then on the 85, which is the gray box, of course we get the car in gray plastic, the air intake scoop is now part of the body. So it was molded in with the body as opposed to being a separate part now. Again, it's the only difference between the three cars is the manner in which they intake air. And the only difference between the three kits, apart from box art, are the race body components. They all have the same parts. The decals are going to be different, and the rear wing is different on the red car than it is on the other two. Other than that, the kits are exactly the same, and that's going to be a recurring theme with the monogram kits. I mean the MPC kits. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Which is going to be an interesting note when we look at the GT model. Okay guys, now we're going to take a look at the fastback version of the Fiero made by MPC. This car was released in 1986 as an all-new model for the Pontiac Fiero with all new body styles. And MPC apparently got the license back from Monogram to release the 1987 Fiero, as 87 is where they've released the 87 GT. All the interesting information on the car, and they carried that over up until 1988. Now, that's an interesting distinction to make, as there were quite a bit of differences in the Fiero from 1987 to 1988. Apart from the V6 engine finally having the correct intake, as it was something that the model corrected, as you see here on the instructions, we do have the proper two-piece intake, actually it's three-piece intake on the Fiero, that matches what's in the car, as opposed to the carbureted engine that was in the previous versions of this kit. Now they still get quite a few other details wrong here, as they have a mechanical external fuel pump. So what they did was they tooled up for the intake, but they didn't change anything else on the engine. So that's something that is still incorrect on the kit from its initial offerings, even though the 4-cylinder kit is very, very accurate, to the best of my knowledge. I primarily just deal with the V6 engines on these cars, and but as far as I can tell here, the 4-cylinder kit does seem to be pretty accurate, as it even includes an AC compressor, which the 6-cylinder engine does not. But that's a whole nother thing we can deal with on the next model. So as we're looking at it now, you can see that the 88 was molded in white, the 87 was molded in red, which on the 88, it's the only time that the box art differentiated from the color of the plastic. Just an interesting note that I've noticed just doing this video, that the box art matched the color of the plastic in the car. Why they changed that for 1988, who knows? As the 87 has a picture of the real car on the box, and the 88 is the model. So I much prefer the box art for the 87, as the 88 picture is not exactly the most flattering of this kit. Now, one of the primary distinctions between the 86 87, and 88 Fiero GTs is that in 1988 they completely redesigned the car, and the suspension systems for 1988 are completely different than what was available in 86 and 87. Unfortunately, when MPC made this kit, they didn't update it. So basically, the 1987 and 1988 Fiero GT kits are exactly the same car. Exactly the same kit, exactly the same parts. The only thing that's different is that in the 88, you'll get a radar detector and a phone for the interior. Otherwise, everything else is exactly the same. You do get some optional wheels, which I don't even know why you would use it if you're building this particular car. There are no race parts or anything involved, so I don't know why they would give you optional wheels, but that's a choice they made. Now, the car you see in the center is the cutaway Fiero that I built many years ago. And here you can get an idea of the kind of detailing this kit has. The MPC kits are the only ones that have interior detailing for the front compartment, or frunk as they're called now, and pop-up headlights that you can display open or closed. The mirror fell off of this kit, so it does have side view mirrors. The detailing is pretty good on this kit. I mean, I really can't fault MPC for that, even though the wheels and tires don't sit anywhere near the way they should, which on any future builds I do of this car, that will be addressed and that will be fixed. But as you can see, the kit does not come with seat belts. That's something I added, and as I said, it's a pretty good representation of the Fiero, apart from the stance of the car and the offset of the wheels being wrong. It actually is not a bad looking kit. Here we're going to take a little closer look at the engine. I did add a little extra detailing here. Let's just pull the engine cover off. And here you can see the intake. The interior is a good representation of the car, but these are all carryover parts from the 1984 model. So basically, if you built the 83 or 84 kit, everything except the body shell is going to be, and the wheels, is going to be pretty much the same. Now I will be building one of these to match my car soon, and that will where I will correct a lot of the I wouldn't say they're flaws, because the kit does go together pretty well, but a lot of the I want to say incorrect details. So that basically covers all of the MPC kits. As I said, they're basically identical. Detailing is the same. The only thing where it changes is if you're going to go with a notchback or a fastback body style. And minor details such as the air intakes, the V6 engine intake, just minor things are different. And either way, they're all good kits. I really enjoyed building them. As from what I remember, which has been a while since I've built one, but from what I remember, there weren't too many fit issues. And my biggest beef with this particular kit is the stance of the wheels. As I think the offsets are wrong, and that's something that will be addressed when I build any future versions of it. Alright, let's move on to the monogram. Okay, and here we are with the last of the scale model Fieros. This one is made by Monogram, and this covers the new for 1985 Fiero GT. Whereas, unlike the other cars from MPC, this Fiero was the only one in 1985 to officially have the V6 engine in it. As you can see, it has the arrow nose, the side skirts, the rear bumper that was previously seen on the 1984 Pace car. Now that body style was not available on any other model of Fiero. in 1985, except for the GT and the SE, I think, which was the SE available in 85? I'm not even, nope. As a matter of fact, no, it was not. It was only the base coupe, the sport coupe, and the GT for 1985. Those were the 3 trim levels. Now, the GT, as I said, carried over the body styling of the 1984 Indy pace car, which basically was a special edition car. They built, I think, 1,200 of them. And it carried over this body style, but only had the 4-cylinder engine in it. This is the introduction of the V6 to the Fiero, was in this particular model. Now, why the other kits from MPC have the V6 in them, that I do not know, as none of those cars should have a V6 in it. So apparently Monogram, as I'm going to, just going to surmise, is that Monogram got the license for the 1985 Fiero GT. So MPC just carried over their previous cars and added to them, as I said on before, to try and match what Monogram was putting out and make something new for 1985. Because apparently they got the licensing back from GM in 86 through 88, and they proceeded to produce the fastback cars. Now, is that exactly how it happened? I don't really know. I'm just guessing, because Monogram only made the Fiero for this 1 year. Now, the interesting thing about this kit is that while the MPC kits have been out of production since 1988, the Monogram kit actually came back into production and was re-released, I think, in 2001. I'm going to go with. I think it was 2001 that it was re-released, and hasn't been seen since. So apparently the kit did well enough for them that they did re-release it, and I'm hoping that they will go another round with it, as I know there's lots of Fiero fans out there that would love to get their hands on this kit. As you can see, the one that I built is really good representation of the car. Now, I put a whole bunch of custom touches into this one, which if you watch my channel, you can follow the entire build series of this car and see exactly how much work I've put into it. As I have my real Fiero, and I use that to base all of the detail work that I did on this one, including the complete detailing of the engine compartment, all wiring and emissions equipment intact. So just take care of that there. I did leave the rear deck lid loose, as when I display it, I like to display it with the rear deck lid off the car so that all of the engine detailing is visible. I did detail the entire interior. It's got carpeting, it's got everything that I normally do on my cars. There's just way too many details on this car to list. My favorite of which is the nose badge, in which I actually recreated a tiny Fiero nose badge for this car. It's not a decal, it's actually a 3-dimensional badge. And that was tough to do. Probably never do that again. But just something I wanted to add to this kit, as this is a really great build, and I recommend if you can find one that you buy one and build it. It's a lot of fun. Now, this is molded in plastic. Okay, that was dumb. This is molded in red. Now, this one has a molded badge in it. They all come with the badge molded into the nose, and this was just an attempt to try and paint the badge and see if it looked better as I was building that one. The detailing is pretty good. The only inconsistency that I can see is they have the air intake scoops as separate parts on the body, because they give you the option of installing the aftermarket ram scoops like we saw on the MPC car. Now, the odd thing is that you have the option of the ram scoops or the regular air intakes, but they give you air intakes for both sides of the car. And if you know the Fiero, you know that it never had an air intake on the passenger side, only on the driver's side. So if you're going to build the car, it's an accurate representation of the Fiero, you will have to fill in the entire passenger side scoop and make make it disappear in order to have an accurate model, as I did on this one. As you see, when it comes around, there is no scoop on the other side, as I had to fill that with putty, shape it all, and paint it, and now we have a much more accurate version of the car. Now, even though I own a Fastback GT, I also own a Notchback Formula version from 1988. This kit is, I think, my favorite of all the Fiero kits, as I found it to be the most accurate of the Fiero kits. The front suspension notwithstanding, as the front suspension on this kit is not exactly correct, but for the most part they got just about everything else right. And it is a fun kit to build. It goes together very nicely. There are very few fit issues, and I can't wait to build another one. It's in the queue for a whole nother version of the car. So that pretty much covers every scale Fiero ever made. The NPCs are all 1/25th. The monogram is 1/24th scale. So there we go. That covers every scale kit ever made of the Fiero. The monogram 1/24th, and all the NPCs at 1/25th. And if you've built one NPC, you've pretty much built them all, as they all assemble pretty much the same. The only difference being the fastback body compared to the notchback body as seen here on the monogram, and as seen on the built car here. They're all really good builds. I enjoyed them. Even the NPCs, I know what we all think about NPC, but it's actually not a bad build. But if you gotta choose between the two, the monogram is the much better kit, even though the monogram does not have an opening front trunk. And it does come with smoked and tinted windshield and rear glass, as one or two versions of the NPC also have the smoked glass. But for the most part, they all come with the clear glass. But as I said, the monogram is my favorite of the two, as it really builds up super nice, slightly larger scale, and was a lot of fun to do. So I will be having a build-up of another monogram and an NPC. We may do a build-off between the two, even though they're a little bit different. They're different scales, but should be interesting to see which one builds better. Alright guys, that's going to be it. That's it for the latest episode of Fieros in Scale. We covered every kit that's out there in 1/24th, 1/25th scale. And remember, if you like what I'm doing, like, subscribe, and Lucas C and BG. Now we're talking vintage kits. And yes, I build them and I save them. Just one of those rare times when you can do both. So I agree with both of you. And I will see you guys on the next one. Remember, like, subscribe, give a thumbs up. Let me know what you think of all of these kits, and what your view is on vintage kits, whether you want to build them or save them. We're curious to see what the general consensus is out there. Alright guys, I'll see you on the next one.